All right, now let's talk about bad romances of the 16th century. Of course, there's Henry and Anne, the most famous, but there were scores of terrible marriages during this time, just as there are today. And just because you couldn't get divorced didn't mean you couldn't figure out ways of walking away. So let's say you find yourself in love and married, and then out of love, but still married. How did you walk away? And why would you take that big step? Well, here's a fun fact. In 16th century Constantinople, where coffee was becoming a huge part of society and everyday life, they created a law saying that any woman could divorce her husband if he didn't provide her with enough coffee. So ladies, get those Starbucks cards to your husbands and have them run out for your cappuccinos and remind them that if they don't, if you were in 16th century Constantinople, you could leave them. So that's a fun fact. But what about England? Let's go through some bad marriages from the Tudor period. Some of them ended in divorce, some ended in death, and some ended in both people just being miserable and avoiding each other as much as possible. The first one I want to talk about is the Duke of Norfolk. He was toxic. The toxic Duke, who schemed and plotted his way throughout most of Henry VIII's reign, was married to Elizabeth Stafford, the Good Duchess. Elizabeth, of course, had a house full of servants. One of them was called Bess Holland. Bess worked in the laundry. She was the daughter of the Duke's secretary. But Bess caught the Duke's notice, and he began paying attention to her. He even brought her to court and lived openly with her, leaving his wife back to, tend to the household duties. Bess became a maid of honor to the toxic Duke's niece, Anne Boleyn. And she had a relationship with the toxic Duke for 15 years. But she probably didn't feel as affectionate towards him as he did to her. When he was arrested, along with his son, she gave testimony that sealed his fate. The younger Howard was executed right before Henry's death, and the elder one, her amour, was saved just because Henry died. They were actually considered Henry VIII's last victims. And the elder Duke of Norfolk was scheduled to be executed, and then Henry died, so he got a reprieve. The elder Howard lived on. He languished in prison during the reign of Edward VI, but then he was let out during Mary's reign because he was Catholic, and so was Mary, and so she let him out. After he was arrested, though, poor Bess got married, finally, and then I say poor Bess because she died in childbirth. So, she thought she was finally getting a chance to marry for love, and that ended very badly. And then there was, of course, the toxic Duke's long-suffering wife. Elizabeth Stafford had originally been meant to marry her father's ward, but after the Duke's first wife died, Thomas Howard came calling. Her father tried to persuade him to marry one of her sisters, but he would have none of it, and he insisted on marrying Elizabeth. She was 15, and he was 20 years older than her, which wasn't particularly unusual for the time, but it rather broke Elizabeth's heart. Then Howard starts his open affair with Bess Holland, and then Elizabeth stayed loyal to Queen Catherine, while Howard installed his various nieces in the king's bed and made his daughter marry the king's illegitimate son. So, that provided for some pretty difficult political conversations. The Duke refused to give up his mistress. He decided he was going to separate from his wife. Both the Duke and Thomas Cromwell requested that the Duchess's brother take her in, which was a suggestion that he flatly turned down. The Duchess wrote of her husband's abuse of her during this period, claiming that when she was recovering after the birth of their daughter Mary, he had pulled her out of bed by the hair, dragged her through the house, and wounded her with a dagger. In 3 separate letters to Cromwell, the Duchess repeated the accusation that the Duke had set his woman to bind me till blood came out at my fingers' ends, and pinnacled me and sat on my breast till I spit blood. So Howard responded to this by writing that, "I think the apparent false lies were never contrived by a wife of her husband, that she doth daily increase of me." So he denied it. This marriage was clearly not going to work, and in 1534, Howard forced a separation. According to the Duchess, the Duke had ridden all night. He arrived home in a temper, locked her in her chamber, and taken away all of her jewelry and her clothing. She was sent to another house. She wrote a lot of letters to Cromwell, complained that she was kept in this state of imprisonment. There's a lot of parallels between her and Catherine of Aragon. And at first, the Duchess tried to reconcile, but then she received no reply. So she said that from this day forward, I will never sue to the king, nor to none other to desire my lord, my husband, to take me again. So she was like, I'm done. Of course, Norfolk refused to give up Bess Holland, and he attempted to persuade the Duchess to agree to a divorce. He offered to return her jewels, which he had stolen from her. And he said he would give her a great part of his plate and stuff of household, but she was like, no, I'm not doing it. She wasn't going to give in. She suffered for this. Her family didn't support her. Her son and her daughter became estranged from her, and her brother disavowed her. She was forsaken by almost everyone, but she stayed stubborn and she wasn't going to give in. And in 1539, so this is years into it, she wrote to Cromwell, I am of age to rule myself as I have done these 5 years since my husband put me away. Seeing that my lord my husband reckoned me to be so unreasonable, it were better that I kept me away and keep my own house still and trouble no other body. I pray you, my lord, take no displeasure with me, although I have not followed your lordship's good counsel and your letters as touching my lord husband for me to come home again, which I will never do. So, not a good time in the Howard household. Another Bess that had a truly terrible marriage was Bess of Hardwicke, who was on her 4th marriage to George Talbot, the Earl of Shrewsbury, when he was charged with guarding Mary, Queen of Scots. Now, at first, this seemed like it was going to be a good deal. They were going to get the approval of the Queen, and Bess appreciated having the trust of the Queen. She even set about trying to prove herself, spying on Mary herself. But the stress got to both Bess and the Earl as time went on, and it didn't seem like there was going to be any escape from this. Guarding Mary meant that they were essentially prisoners themselves, because if they left and Mary escaped, they, of course, would be blamed. So Bess was getting really tired of this. She was also feeling quite jealous of Mary, Queen of Scots, who was very beautiful and charming at this time, and the attention that her husband was paying towards her. So she did not want to take the blame for the breakdown of the marriage. So she spread rumors that Mary, Queen of Scots had been sleeping with her husband and had borne him at least one child, possibly several. Mary, Queen of Scots, was not happy with this slur on her reputation, and she complained loudly about the foul slanders and insolence of this vulgar-minded woman. Now, the Queen, Elizabeth herself, actually tried to intervene and tried to reconcile Bess and her husband, playing marriage counselor. She was very fond of the Earl of George Talbot, but she seems to have felt some sympathy and some empathy with Bess. And George Talbot's claims that Bess had tried to rule him and make me the wife and her the husband would not have landed well with Elizabeth. Elizabeth did achieve a temporary reconciliation between the two, and Bess and her husband, quote, showed themselves very well content with Her Majesty's speeches, and in good sort departed together. And that was when they were together with Elizabeth. But then they made it back to their estates, and they decided to live separate lives. The Earl declared that he would neither bed her nor board with her. And then, of course, Bess of Hardwicke went off and started her own building projects and building Hardwicke Hall. So that was in 1587, the year that Mary, Queen of Scots was executed. The courts awarded Bess both Chatsworth and an income from her husband. So she went off and did her own thing and left him in dust.